The numbers are staggering. The atrocities committed are unthinkable. The consequences are unimaginable. And the rates of those who perish in the Holocaust have sworn never to let it happen again. Never again. These words are in the back of a book that I am going to be explaining my personal thoughts and also what I see, why I'm going to call it one of the most historically significant tabletop RPG supplements in the medium. This is Chanel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. Chanel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, it's basically kind of an add-on to Wraith the Oblivion, in which you play as a ghost, more or less. This is a book that tackles the victims of the Holocaust and as wraiths in their own location called the Dark Kingdom of Wire. Here's why I go so far as to say it is a book that I think any person who wants to be going into very mature topics, this book tackles extremely heavy topics that many people are very, very uncomfortable with. And that is the atrocities of the Holocaust of World War II, the genocides, and the victims that were tragically taken by the Nazi regime. The reason why I call this incredibly historically significant is because of this fact. Never have I seen a book for a tabletop RPG tackle this type of subject with such maturity. And for people who say that tabletop RPGs are merely for children, show them this book, 5 seconds later, their entire worldview will change like that. And that's what this book is. This book is rather designed to make you incredibly uncomfortable. And I was actually having a discussion on the Botch Pit Discord about this book. One person says that he really thinks it should never have been made. I can understand his point of view. However, I do think something like this was bound to happen in order to show the potential maturity of tabletop RPGs. And this is, to me, the epitome of that. It is a book that handles this topic with respect. It separates the fact from the fiction. That way you know what is fact, you know what is fiction. This is an incredibly important book. I highly recommend for people. I'm always going to recommend definitely at least once. Although, yes, it is a difficult game to play, it's also a game that I have that much more respect for. It is a game that tackles death. It tackles all sorts of matters of death. Suicide, homicide, accidents, and seemingly, as along with this book, genocide. And in this book, after reading it, there was something that kind of became hollow to me. Because if you look at our world, we say never again, as stated in this book. Never again. But here we are, we're doing the same shit again and again. There was a genocide in Rwanda, there's a trans genocide, and yes, I'm calling it what it is. The fact that people are constantly dehumanizing others. People like Matt Walsh, who calls himself a theocratic fascist, and now we have every reason to believe him. And I refuse to call him an American, so there's also that. If anything, he's anti-American. I don't give a fuck what anyone's going to say. But what this book is a direct reply to the idea that tabletop RPGs cannot or should not be able to tackle very difficult topics. And one thing I really like about this type of game is the fact it is not a power fantasy. That is not what this game is. It is not a power fantasy. If you are trying to get into something like Wraith as like a power fantasy where you just want to play as a ghost, do some cool powers, this is not for you. The horror is in the helplessness that people have experienced back in the Holocaust. The absolute despair that people have felt. And honestly, I think that's one of the most important aspects. I think a lot of games, especially a lot of, say, war movies or anti-war movies. Personally, I believe one of the only true anti-war films to ever really exist is the movie Come and See. Highly recommend it. It is a cinematic and just story masterpiece. This book is what I would consider the tabletop RPG version of something of that caliber. That's the reason why I call this incredibly significant. It's not only incredibly significant for White Wolf and Black Dog. Black Dog was a subsidiary of White Wolf. These were the very, very like adults only kind of story supplements. And it's something that I very highly respect. They tackled this game with tact. And I understand. Some people will probably say this feels rather exploitative. I get that. I personally do not feel that way about this game. I feel this was absolutely necessary. Black Dog had kind of hits and misses. Eternal Hearts was basically porn. I'm not going to lie to you. It was porn. it was really smutty. But I definitely do consider for those, even if you don't like the topic, this is an incredible, it's an incredible testament to how tabletop RPGs can be used to explore and just understand the gravitas of these historic periods. That is why I consider this book an absolute must-have. I absolutely implore anyone to get this book. This copy, I just got it yesterday. It came through the mail. It was less than $20. Trust me when I say, I highly implore getting Wraith the Oblivion, getting this book as well. Just all the Wraith the Oblivion supplements. Wraith is just an amazing and fantastic game, which you could use to explore, and really gather a truly meaningful experience. And that, to me, this game really helps. I think a lot of World War II games, and especially video games, they want to try and gather this power fantasy about it, which is why like Call of Duty and shit exists. But I really would like to see something like Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, as a video game. And I understand a lot of people would possibly find that offensive, but in order to truly just gather the absolute, just the weight of the atrocity that it has in history, I think something of that type of horror, where you are a victim, you are desperately trying to survive, that, to me, would make possibly one of the most important video games in history, along with this as one of the most important tabletop gaming pieces in history, in the history of the medium. And I will also say this. The thing about the Holocaust that a lot of people fail to understand is it wasn't just the Jews that were targeted. There were many people. Disabled people. Mentally and physically disabled. Homosexual people. People who did not align with the gender identity, in which they did not align with their sex at birth. Romani people. All of these types of people were victims. Many did not survive. To me, something like this, in order to kind of place yourself in those shoes, I think is rather necessary in order to truly understand and empathize and really humanize people of different circumstances in life. And that's the thing. Humanization, empathy, representation, all of these things are good in order to promote understanding between one another and prevent atrocities like this from happening again. And that is one thing I do want to talk about. I want to talk about what's been happening as of recent with with the LGBT community, along with just trans people specifically. The fact that my nation has constantly been falling for the rhetoric of a few douchers who basically have dehumanized an entire group of people with no fucking with no evidence whatsoever. It goes to show this idea of never again, it's a fantasy. And I will also say this to the tragedy that has recently befallen in I believe the UK, a murder victim by the name of Brianna Gay, or Brianna Jay. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name. She was a trans girl, 15 years old, who was murdered. And it goes to show that they are not willing to even announce those ideas. They're not even willing to announce the full truth. Many of the news organizations refuse to tell the whole truth. Two other teenagers were arrested in connection to it. We don't know if they were perpetrators or what. We still don't know the full story. So I'm saying alleged. But because of the type of rhetoric that's been spewing, mainly from a couple people, very, very popular here in the U.S., I can give you two of them at least, Matt Walsh, Shia Raichik, or Haya Raichik. It goes to show we didn't fucking learn anything. I sincerely fucking believe if we want to prevent something like this from happening again, we need to do something. And we will call them what they are. They are stochastic terrorists. They are anti-American. I'm not going to tread that lightly. The time of niceties is fucking done. The time of being forgiving, it's fucking done. Here's something funny to people like Matt Walsh and you dipshit fucking conservatives supporting their shit. I am more like Jesus than you will ever be. take that what you will. You can try and call that fucking arrogance. I call it a rather funny observation. The fact that I can live my life closer to Jesus than you ever could. You do not deserve to be calling yourself Christians in any way, shape, or fucking form. And I'm not going to be nice. Because I'm not Jesus. Like I said, people can bring you the fucking olive branch, but here's the thing. What use is that if you fucking nuke the whole tree? But either way, I was wanting to talk about this book, my thoughts on it, and my thoughts on recent events. And people willingly saying fascism. You do know what we did to fascists, or at least what we should have done. It's fucking debatable with America. We would kick your ass like halfway across the fucking street and back. You think your ideology is compatible with the fucking, like, the philosophy that founded our fucking nation? Get fucking real. No. Like, I'm sorry, but I would be with the people like Antifa. I think Antifa is a lot more badass than you'll ever be. Antifa, if I were to see Antifa members just start grabbing people like who willingly proclaim themselves to be fascists and start fucking snapping spines in half, I'd be like, they're doing a fucking service. So, either way, this was just kind of my thoughts, and also my thoughts on this book in general. And I wanted to go deeper into like the importance of games like this. And that's the reason why, you know, something like this needs to exist. I'm not going to say that this book is hard to read. Well, it isn't. I'm not going to say that this book is not hard to read. It is. It is incredibly difficult to read. But when you get through it, I'm certainly hoping you come to a new light. You come to a new understanding. And you come to truly understand why I hold something like this in such high regard, and why I hold Wraith the Oblivion in such high regard. Why I consider these to be, you know, incredibly impactful for the tabletop RPG industry, the community, the fandom, and stuff like that. Why it is so important, and why we should hold games like these in very high regard, even if you find it potentially offensive. And I know there are people who will possibly find it offensive. I'm not going to speak for them. I'm going to speak my personal thoughts on this book. And it truly kind of taught me that humanization is really the best way for humanity to truly thrive. Fascism is not the fucking way to go. Dehumanization is not the way to go. It just creates nothing but cycles of fucking atrocities. Atrocity after fucking atrocity after fucking atrocity. And we still don't fucking learn. But either way, this was a small video. I know half of it seemed like a bit of rambling, and the other it kind of delved into topics, but overall, the core theme is understand history, understand, you know, try to see yourself in another person's shoes, and, you know, definitely give this a read. It's very hard to read, but when you get through it, hopefully you kind of understand what I'm going, the point that I'm getting at. And, yeah, don't support fascism, stay based, be kind to one another.